All right, that story from Jeff Kirui now is going to lead us into our conversation of the day, where we are looking at genetic engineering, just to be specific, GMOs in Kenya. And joining us is Professor Richard Oduor from Kenyatta University. You are a bioscientist. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Today.
My pleasure, thank you.
All right, so when you look at, first of all, when you look at a story like that, from where you sit, give us your reactions before you even get into our conversation.
Well, Calvin, I think this is a good move. We must start looking at food security through the entire, through the lenses of entire production, inputs. And fertilizer, for instance, is one of them. Mm-hmm. Of course, there are a number of things. He's actually also mentioned something to do with the drying, which is very critical as well for post-harvest losses, which actually, if you don't dry very well, you end up with a lot of aflatoxin in many of your grains. Mm-hmm. And that is also a concern. So he has actually hinted to two, fertilizers and post-harvest losses. But you see, fertilizer is just one of them, treating the health of the soil. But you see, how about the diseases? How about fall armyworm? How about recently you saw a lot of some insects, the larva of some caterpillar actually is clearing forests in a particular area. How do you deal with that? If however much fertilizer you add on the soil doesn't stop that, mm-hmm. How do you deal with the stem borer that eats the maize, even with the fertilizer? So they'll get healthy maize to eat. So how do you deal with that? So mm-hmm. That is when biotechnology and genetic engineering comes in, together with other tools to sort out that. Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. Still on this, let us look at subsidizing fertilizer.
Yes.
How does this help increase food production? Because as you've mentioned, the soil is not well taken care of.
That's right.
You're still adding fertilizer. So when you subsidize the fertilizer, does this really help in food production to even increase it?
There are different ways to look at it. One is that if you have healthy seed and you plant it in the soil that is infertile, then that seed, regardless of how healthy it is or protected it will still not get the nutrients that are in the soil. And therefore, if you add fertilizer, you are treating the soil. That is just one aspect. There are other aspects like the rain. Even however much fertilizer you add, if there is no water, again, you've done nothing.
Yes.
So from where I sit, I think it is a conglomerate of many things that need to be looked at together in ways that can actually improve food production. Mm-hmm. And if in this particular case, for instance, if you subsidize fertilizer, then it means, assuming for basic mathematics, it was 6,500. Mm-hmm. Now it is 2,500. And we believe that should be the truth. Mm-hmm. So you have already 4,000 left in the hands of a farmer. Mm-hmm. So this 4,000, which was originally expected to go buy fertilizer, mm-hmm. is now amount that can be used to deal with other inputs. For instance, weeding. Fertilizer doesn't help you with weeding. It actually makes the soil very fertile for more weeds to pop up.
Yes.
So what does that mean? That you have a 4,000 mm-hmm. that you should use to employ other people to do the weeding on time. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't weed on time, then it means you will not get the intended yield. So yes, cumulatively it does something. When every other things are in place, mm-hmm. because the fertilizer is in place, the seed is right, the weeding is done on time, and then the insects are protected, and then there is water, you're good. And after the harvesting, then you also store it correctly. That way you have dealt with the entire food production system. So once you harvest and you store it well, you're good to now translate it into different foods. Mm-hmm. For instance, other products. Mm-hmm. You can add value. Like if you're making crepes, really, that is still corn, which if you don't convert it to that, it is still popcorns, for instance, and probably, crepes from, potatoes and all this. So we must look at it from the pre-planting, which means how did you prepare your soil before you planted, all the way to storage, yes. And then conversion into something else, which mm-hmm. is now the value add.
So it's a whole process. The value chain, the whole of which needs to be looked at.
Yes, very
critically.
Very critically.
All right. So let's move on to you spoke about now the genetic technology, the genetic engineering, and how it comes in to solve this. First of all, when you talk about genetic engineering, how is it going to solve this issue that we've been having, just repeated issue of food security? When drought comes, there's a problem. So how does it come in to help the situation?
It's a very interesting thing, because whereas people have developed an opinion around GMO, anytime you mention GMO, people just feel like it is something very dangerous that is coming to kill everybody. And actually, it's going to cause cancer, and we are going to be consumed. Our body will be obese, and all those crazy things that people talk about. But if they bother to listen to some of us, I have a training in genetic engineering, and I have also a training in drug discovery, so I can speak for both ends, you know, the disease part of it and also the nutritional part of it. Now, we probably need to start by unpacking what is really this GMO, so that they actually even understand from where we come, and the basis on which we argue that it's useful. You know, Calvin, when you look at a crop, first of all, human beings and animals must know that these crops actually don't know that we eat them. And if the moment they'll know that we eat them, they will hide even the seeds on the roots so that you don't even see. That's how we start. We must know that anything that is alive has a duty for persistence or existence in this world, survival for the fittest. That is why when there is cold, like now, you find me wearing a jacket, I have a coat, and I have, what am I protecting really? I don't want to be killed by pneumonia because of cold. So at least for human beings and animals, we have an opportunity to run away if there is fire. We run away from fire because we have seen it. Look at a plant, you know, a maize crop, when the fire is coming, it will still sit there and wait. That means, therefore, that over time, these plants have developed mechanisms of surviving. You know, insect is coming to eat this particular maize, Stembora, and it can't move away from it. So it will sit there and wait. So how do you deal with such a thing? It means you start to look at what are the other things that we can do to motivate it. So human beings, we are very funny. We have also very restricted eating patterns. Like, for instance, if I tell you right now to start eating those omena thing, the small little fish daga, which I really like, you will say, no, you don't like them because probably they are looking at you as you're eating them. But the truth is, and then you don't eat it because it is banned. It's eating it because it has choice. Now, biotechnology, this is what we do. We have understood that the climate change is here. We have understood that 65% of the African labor, you know, the economy of Africa, and particularly Kenya, depends on agriculture. We have also understood that our farmers are aging. Young people like you don't want to do, actually, farming. You want to tweet fertilizer, and you think you can TikTok, see, you know, weeding. You have to get there and deal with it. And then we've realized you want a white-collar job, the population is increasing, and something else that we keep forgetting. Last year, in November 15th, the world population hit the all-time high of 8 billion. That was the first time, 15th of November last year. That is probably a discussion that we didn't have in this country actively, that what does this mean? You will realize that this population increase will happen a lot more in the developing countries, Kenya included. Then the issues around food must now become very important for us to discuss. And that is when we come in and say, look, there is a technology called genetic engineering. And what is really genetic engineering? It means that you are able to take genes from another source which was not originally of the same species like the one you are targeting. And I'll break it very easily for you. For instance, if you eat githeri, you are eating a mixture of maize and beans, right? And you are taking beans because you want to get proteins. And you are taking maize in it because that gives you carbohydrates. And you are actually seeking a balanced diet. And if you ask me from where I sit, you are eating those things because you are just looking for carbohydrates and proteins, not because you like beans. And that is why when there is no beans, you go for fish because you know proteins is there. When there is no fish, you go for beef because you are looking for the proteins. Meaning fish, beans and meat, all of them are giving you same nutrition, you know, which is proteins. Maize, you know, also will give you the same. So when you eat maize, cassava, and probably finger millets, you are still getting carbohydrates. Now, when you probably have noticed that there is drought, and this country experienced a lot of episodes of drought. Several cycles of that. Now we get to a point where we can no longer get beans because of one, probably drought, or number two, probably insects, or there could be disease that is clearing, wiping off beans off this world. Because climate is changing. Remember what climate change means is that the environment is changing, and this is leading to other things. So insects that were previously not eating beans, for instance, find beans palatable because whatever they were eating in the wild is no longer there.
Yes.
So it is survival for the fittest. That is the way. That is how now these pests and diseases and insects now become virulent. Virulent is their ability now to attack areas that were not previously even their interest. Now, if that happens and the beans are cleared out, what do you do? And you still need the proteins from that. You can't get that protein in maize, because maize is absolutely carbohydrates. Genetic engineering, and through the sequencing, which happened several years ago, we have found out that anything that is alive in this world, insect, mango, cow, pigs, anything that has life, that has a cell, in it, and I don't know whether you did a bit of biology, there is an organelle in the middle of a cell called the nucleus. In there are things that we are calling nucleic acids. Those nucleic acids are two. One is DNA, one is RNA. But whatever is popular is DNA. That's what everybody else talks about. Now, in the DNA there, that is like the motherboard of everything. Now, within that nucleus, those DNA, all the things that are alive have only 4 letters, Calvin. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. A, T, G, and C. Those are the only letters in the DNA. Now, the variation is those A, T, G, C keep repeating themselves in a particular sequence and the number. Now, this is what it means, that in your genome as a human being, these letters A, T, G, C have repeated themselves in your genome 3.2 billion times. And how did we get to that number? Because there is sequencing. So we are able to sequence anything that is alive to get to know how those letters are.
All right. Before we even get to more science stuff and go deeper,
yes,
we want to go for a short break. Yeah. Now, briefly.
Yes.
Just briefly, for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
What is gene editing going to solve when it comes to food security? For 30 seconds, if you're possible, so that if you're possible to do that, so that we go for a short break.
It will solve the crop food production constraints that naturally cannot be solved with the current circumstances that we have.
Okay.
It will. And what that would mean is that instead of spraying to kill pests, we put it in the genome so that it's more or less like we are immunizing maize, so that it develops antibodies against the pests.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. And I believe this subject has really very, very deep stuff. You've heard of the 4 letters. Right, that's it. We are going for a short break. We've been speaking to Professor Richard Oduor, who is a bioscientist from Kenyatta University, explaining to us about gene editing and the science behind this and how it's coming to solve the problem of food security in the country. We're going to go for a short break, but when we come back, we're going to discuss about the automotive industry in Kenya. We'll be speaking to Jack Wooton, who is the Managing Director, Wooton Automotives. Don't go too far.